Hey, pool chasers! Don't forget that the Pleatco Perfect Pool Guy and Gal contest is now accepting nominations. If you know anyone you think deserves to be nominated, please do so. For all the details, check out episode 114 of the podcast or click the link below. Now let's get to today's episode, which is all about pool closings. We talked to Chaz about pool openings earlier this year, and we asked him back to talk about closings and winterizations today. Again, being from Arizona, we don't really deal with this a lot since our pools stay open year-round. But we know a lot of you and a lot of people around the country start their closing season after Labor Day. We asked Chaz to walk us through his company's process, and he shared that with us as well as many other helpful tips to know when it comes to closing a pool. Being from New Jersey area and on the board of directors at NESPA, Chaz has a ton of experience in the area, and we definitely learned a lot on this episode. We hope you do as well. Please enjoy episode 115 with Chaz Bogardus of Buds, Pools, and Spas.
Welcome to your go-to podcast for the pool and spa industry. My name is Tyler Rasmussen.
And my name is Greg Villafania. And this is the Pool Chasers Podcast.
All right, well, thank you again for joining us, Chaz. We appreciate you being on the podcast again.
No, thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, no problem. How's your summer been?
Just super busy. Definitely a summer like no other, that's for sure. Dealing with things that, we don't normally need to deal with, but it's definitely been a crazy summer. Doesn't seem like there's been like a real, for us here in the Northeast, we're super busy in the spring, and then we're super busy in the fall. We usually have a little bit of a lull in July and August, and that really, it really didn't happen as much as it normally does, that's for sure.
Do you think that's because you got a late start to the season, or?
So I guess our season started a bit later than it normally did because of COVID. Not too bad, though. I mean, we were deemed essential from the beginning, so we could continue to go. But with all the guys, there was definitely some apprehension and what we needed to do to bring people back and, getting in the backyards. So I do think that although the season, in some respects, it kind of started a little bit earlier because people were home, so they wanted their pools opened earlier, which was fine. It just made the season a little bit bigger, a little bit longer. And, I think what the whole pool industry has found is that there's just money getting dumped in to backyards that I guess maybe normally goes on vacations or who knows what, but it definitely seems like for us, it's been a whirlwind of, trying to get things done.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good to hear. It seems like our industry is doing pretty good through this, so that's great.
Yeah.
So, we talked to you on episode 97 about pool openings, so we wanted to have you here back to discuss pool closings today. Can you share with us when your typical pool closing season starts and what closing a pool means exactly?
Yeah, so pool closings or winterizations generally start after Labor Day for us. That being said, we certainly have stragglers. We probably already closed 10 or 15 pools. But essentially a winterization for us up here in the Northeast is pretty straightforward. We will go out and we'll drain all the water out of the equipment, blow out the lines. So all the water that's in the lines will push out and replace the water with air, and then put a cover on a pool and put it to bed for the winter.
And why exactly do you need to winterize a pool? We're here in Arizona. We're not as familiar with having to do that because we don't have to do that. We're very lucky
Sure.
that way. But why exactly do you need to winterize a pool?
So up here, the temperatures will go down certainly below freezing. And so we have to evacuate all the equipment and all the plumbing lines from any standing water. And we do that in a couple of different ways. Obviously, you can't just pull the drain plugs in and worry about the equipment above the ground because it will freeze here and we'll get freezes. And we're in South Jersey. We're just east of Philadelphia. And obviously, the further north you go, the deeper the freeze gets. But, the freeze can go down. I mean, it can go down pretty heavy and get into the ground 8-10 inches. We haven't had one of those winters recently. Normally, if you leave water in the pipes, everything above ground will break first. Obviously, it'll freeze expands. But for the most part, we evacuate all the lines and make sure no water can get back in there.
Yeah, what does that process look like exactly?
So, you go to a swimming pool. We work under the pretense, and a lot of guys will do this differently, but we actually go out and we want the homeowner to have the pool balanced before we come. So if they're a weekly service customer, we've had it balanced all winter, or all summer, I should say. So water chemistry is balanced prior to us going. So we'll go out depending on what kind of cover it is, whether it's a safety cover, whether it's a water bag cover, whatever they're looking for, or even if it's an automatic cover, but whatever they have, we're going to take the water level down to the proper level. And that's different for different pools and different covers for us. And then, we'll take the system apart. If they have a DE filter or cartridge filter, we're going to take them out and hose off and completely clean the grids or the DE. We actually take the grids out. We take the manifold apart. We hose off, all 8 grids individually, check and inspect for any holes, anything to any problems you may have. Check the manifold, make sure that's not cracked. Put everything back together again, and provide everything's good. We'll put that grid assembly back in the filter for the winter, and then we'll start blowing out the lines. So you could do that with either a blower or a compressor. You can use a blower. A lot of times they can use a blower as a vacuum for liners. So we'll use blowers are pretty readily available for us up here. Some companies use compressors. Now, if you're getting into commercial pools, now you're talking about a tow behind compressor. But we have these blowers that are pretty strong. They'll blow out main drains, up to 3-4 inch plumbing lines on a main drain. But that's it. I mean, that's what we need to do, and we can get into specifics on different kind of pools and how we go through that. But when we're blowing the equipment out, we start at the pump, and that's where we hook up our blowers, and then we blow all the water back into the pool. And as the water's blowing out, then obviously the air comes out. And as the air comes out, it's just bubbling up like crazy. So as the air's blowing, you actually can take that rubber winterizing plug and you just jam it into the return fitting, kind of twist it on and then, tighten the wing nut to expand that plug. And you expand that plug till no more air comes out. And, you work your way around the pool. We always kind of have the rule of thumb that you blow, depending on how the pool is plumbed in, you always plug the hole that's blowing the strongest, because that's probably the one that's closest to the equipment. So as you blow some, then as you close some off, then maybe others, if they're all, if they did like one home run and have 3 or 4 lines on the pool, it's pretty straightforward which one's, the closest. And then they kind of, you go around, and once they're all done, you move on to the next, whether you're blowing out the skimmers or you're blowing out the main drains. And when you blow out the main drains, that's a whole nother little category. But you blow out the main drains, we're not diving down into the bottom of the pool and plugging that. So that's definitely a bit trickier, but you have to have an isolated valve to blow out the main drain. So when you're blowing out a main drain, as the water comes up, obviously the main drain starts bubbling like crazy. So whether you're doing it, if the main drain line goes back to the equipment, there's a valve, a dedicated valve, whether it's a Janny valve or a ball valve. And as you're blowing that main drain out, you close the valve right in the middle of you blowing it out. It's blowing like crazy, causing waves in the pool. And then you quickly turn that valve. And the idea is you're then trapping air from that valve at the equipment to the bottom drain. So it's just like us. If you put your finger over a straw, right, and you got, and you got a glass, you put your finger over a straw, you pull it up, you're actually keeping the water in the line, right, or whatever you're drinking. So, but if you take that same straw and empty it and put your finger over it and then push it down into the cup, right, the water can't go in the straw because there's nowhere for the air to come out. The air is taking the place. And that's the same concept of what we're doing when we're blowing a main drain out here, right? So we're blowing it out, and water can't get back up unless there's an air leak in the valve or a crack in the pipe. That gets a bit tricky. That's one of the bigger concerns, is making sure the main drain gets blown out correctly.
Thank you. So you're probably running into a lot of different repairs and, different things like that. Is that stuff that you're getting on the schedule right away, or are you waiting till the next season? How are you dealing with that? Because I can only imagine being so close to the pool and you're closing it and you're just getting real close to everything that you're finding things that need to be fixed. How are you dealing with that?
So the one thing that we obviously have to fix right on the spot is if you do blow out a main drain and you hear that valve passing and you hear the air coming back up, that is something that you would need to address right away, or write up a service ticket and then come back and blow it out if you don't have the valve on the truck. But for the most part, when we go up to a swimming pool, that pool should be clean and clear and the equipment should be running. And one of the good practices is to just check and make sure everything's running okay. You turn the heater on, make sure the heater's working, or, check for leaks to the equipment, see if the seals are leaking, because inevitably, what we get a lot in the springtime is, well, the heater worked when you closed the pool. I'm like, okay, well, that was 8 months ago, and it's not working now. Maybe because it was out in the winter. So, you always want to kind of check operations of everything, and I make a list. And certainly, if the pump's bad, or if they need to be replumbed, or they need new stuff, and a lot of times the customers will even give you that information. Hey, we're looking to do this next year, that next year. So we'll take pretty detailed notes, and that's something that we will go back, giving them estimate for the repairs. And a lot of times it's something that we can do later in the fall, early winter, or potentially in the late winter, early spring. We can go out and start handling some of those repairs. Really depends on the climate because it gets cold pretty quick.
Yeah, thank you. And you were talking a little bit about heaters. Have you ever closed a pool and customers might reach back out maybe a couple months later, see how they can start things back up so they can actually use their heater to heat their pool? Because I can imagine that happens quite a bit.
No, I wouldn't say it's quite a bit, but I would tell you that I've definitely had many different occasions where people, will close a pool, we'll go back out and open the pool before Christmas, maybe mid-December, and they'll run it through if they're home over the holidays, and then we'll go back out and close it in early January. I know I actually had a real good friend of mine call me up one time, and he wanted to know. He's like, I know this is a stretch, but he actually he was an ordained pastor, and he wanted to know if there was any way that I could heat up my spa attached to my pool, and he could do a baptism in my spa. And I said, yeah, I can. So so he wanted to do it. I'm like, yeah, it's no big deal. And I just, went out before I went to church, and I just opened my spa, got everything running, turned the heater on, and I left and came back, and he was done, and I closed it back up again. So it's definitely something that I don't think that it gets done often, but it's definitely something, and here, when you have pool spa combinations up here in the Northeast, they will do some different things with unions. So like in between jandy valves. So the first jandy valve in front of the pump, as you guys know, that separates the pool and the spa. And then the first jandy valve coming out of, first three-way coming out of the heater, that separates pool and spa. So there's some companies here that'll put double unions on both sides of the jandy valves to separate the pool and the spa. So you take two unions. So if you loosen both of them, then you're taking essentially about a 4 or 5 inch section of pipe out. And then you can put a winterizing plug in there. And now you've completely separated the pool and the spa. And people will run their spas much later into the season. So it's just not real efficient because you have equipment it's above ground. So, and when it gets below freezing, it's going to run 24/7. So it's not super efficient, but we have a lot of people that'll, open their spa, early March. And then we'll go back and take the pool cover off when it's pool cover season, maybe it's mid-May here. And then the same thing, they'll close the pool or put the pool cover on sometime in mid to late September before the leaves fall, I guess. And then I've had people where we're calling them, Thanksgiving time, first week in December, and then we'll go out and close the spa that's attached to a pool. So here, you can get like an 8 or 9 month season out of an attached spa if you wanted to.
Nice. And you're also talking about water chemistry. Do you usually need that nice and balanced before you close the pool?
Sure. It's funny because here we have with the extreme change in climate, here, you could close a pool and it'd be perfectly balanced, at 75 degrees. Well, over the course of the wintertime, it's going to go down to 35 degrees, right? Could even go below freezing. So if you know the saturation index and you look at the temperature factor, that will significantly change, what that's going to do to the balance of the water. So it's always a tricky thing to, what are you balancing the water to? Are you balancing to where you are? Or are you going to balance it to where it's going? So that's a tricky conversation to take on, but it's definitely something that we're balancing the water. And for the most part, unless they have new plaster, it's generally not too much trouble for you to balance it as you close. And then when you open back up, you're generally in a pretty good spot.
Is it usually a little bit more difficult in taking on new pools that you guys haven't been taking care of that aren't balanced the way that you would want it to? Because you'd probably have to be making a few visits before closing it if it were totally out of whack.
Right. So again, there's people that close pools up here and they'll balance the pool at the closing. So they'll set up a trash pump or something like that, and I've seen people set up a trash pump and run the 3-inch hose back into the pool, right? So they're and then the pool needs 10 pounds of alkalinity, 20 pounds of calcium, whatever it needs to get balanced. They'll balance it hard and circulate that water, mix everything up, and then close the pool that way. We're not That's just not a way that we choose to do it. We would want to, take on a pool. We actually have customers start coming in when they set up their closings. We have it set up that, hey, bring a water sample to the store, get it tested 2 weeks prior to us coming out. And if you need to make any adjustments, give yourself a week to make adjustments and then have it tested again. We kind of, where we are, we're in a blue collar section of town. We certainly have customers who we do a lot of weekly services for, that stretch far out. But, we're taking care of those pools. So those pools are already balanced. But, we put the onus on the homeowner to have that water balance prior to us coming. Does happen, though, when they come in and they do a water test, makes me kind of out of my mind. But, they'll call me and they're like, yeah, you can't close this pool tomorrow because it's, it's got a pH of this or whatever. And it's just way out of balance. And, then we got to reschedule that. But we really want the water to be balanced prior to closing.
Right. And I'm sure, do you guys sell a lot of pool covers going into closing pools? Just because if somebody maybe has a new pool or something like that and they've never closed the pool and don't have a cover, because most of the time I'm assuming they need the cover for this part of the year because nobody's going to be using it, right?
Oh, for sure. So, the new pools that we build, I would like to think that every new pool that we build, they don't always get the safety cover with the swimming pool, because certainly up here, depending on the pool you're building, the pools up here can have a tendency to be a little bit bigger. Our standard pool up here is usually 700-800 square feet. So that's a pretty big cover. So from an expense standpoint, you just spend all that money on a pool, you may not have another $5,000 or $6,000 to drop on a safety cover, depending on if you have a waterfall, do you have different things, and they can range from $2,500 to, $10,000, right? So it all depends
chump
on,
change.
what we're working around. So that's a tricky thing. We'd love to think that, sometimes people get pool covers with the pools that we build, but when you're servicing and opening and closing a bunch of pools, obviously their covers wear out, and then we replace the covers. So there's a big market for replacement covers up here as well.
Yeah. Is there a type of cover that you like best?
Yes. So we love up here. I mean, I've been a huge proponent of the solid safety cover. Solid safety cover, it's trampoline style, not with the bungee cords, meaning that the straps go all the way across the top of the cover. And it looks like a trampoline as opposed to some of the covers that have like a bungee style cord that it'll actually lay on top of the water. They're very effective, but we generally do the trampoline style with the springs and the straps. And we choose to do solid safety covers because when it's a solid cover, when you open the pool should literally be as clean and clear as you close it. So if you close the pool and it's crystal clear and the water's nice and balanced, you put a solid safety cover on, you don't have to worry about it getting dirty. Nothing's going through the cover. There's no sun going through, so that you're not going to bloom algae. And that pool opens up crystal clear. So the problem with solid safety covers compared to mesh safety covers is that a solid safety cover, when it rains or it snows, the water's going to collect on the top. You need to pump that water off in order for it to be safe. So with a solid safety cover, they sell that in two ways. They sell with a drain panel or a drain strip so that the water will fall through, or they sell with an automatic cover pump, which is what we choose. So the water will collect to one spot on top of the cover, and then the pump will just shoot that water off into the ground, next to the pool. So that's the style that we choose. A big drawback industry-wide with solid safety covers is they're so heavy. So it'd be nothing to have a solid safety cover that weighs, 200 pounds, 250 pounds, where mesh covers are, generally maybe 100 pounds. You can manhandle them yourself. The solid safety covers, they are heavy, but we find that the customers are just way happier opening that pool and it being clean and clear compared to a mesh cover, which over time, the mesh covers, they may start off opening the pool clear, especially the standard ones, but it's a woven material. As it gets older, it will open up a little bit, which will allow more sun, pollen, dust, dirt. That'll all go through the pool. And usually in, years 4, 5, or 6, that pool could open up and it could be a swamp, literally a swamp. You may not see the top step, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing anything to try and keep it clean over the course of the wintertime. But solid safety is where we go for the most part.
Nice. And are those difficult to store?
Yeah, the covers, we take the covers off in the springtime and we pressure wash them and then we fan fold them. We actually make notes on the paperwork, fan folded and rolled toward the house. So we'll fan fold them. So it'll be in a, basically about a 3 or 4 foot section, and they'll be kind of fan folded together. And then we'll roll it one side, and then it comes with a bag that you can then take that cover in. And I tell people all the time that if the cover's folded well, it should store in an area about the size of a standard charcoal grill. Maybe it's 3 foot wide, 4 foot tall, and maybe 18 inches or so deep. That would be the standard. Now, of course, if you have a huge pool, could take a little bit more than that. But for the most part, that's how that cover stores. Hopefully people put it in the shed or they put it in the garage. We just got to keep it out of the way. We have up here, we have a lot of woods, and you feel so bad for people. They have these safety covers. They store it in the shed, and all of a sudden the mice, or I've even seen ants, get in there, and covers folded up like an accordion, right? So if you get a mouse that gets in there and they chew their way through, you open that cover up and there's a hole in every panel on the same line going all the way across the pool. Yeah. So, it may only be a 2 or 3 inch hole, but depending on how big the mouse chewed through that. But
and is that part of the reason why you guys are documenting? You said you're taking notes when you're rolling it up. Is that part of the reason why?
So we're taking notes because, especially with a solid safety cover, when you unroll it, so, you have this big bag that you bring out to the pool, and there's the cover. So there's nothing at that moment that's telling you, is this a shallow end? Is this the deep end? How's the cover figured out, right? So the worst thing that you can do is not know how the cover was taken care of in the spring. And we always used to complain that, because up here, we have a lot of customers for us that'll open the pool themselves. So they'll open it themselves, but then they'll have us close it because they don't want to take a chance of not blowing the lines out right and having something freeze and break. But they'll open the pool themselves. So we take covers out, and it's a train wreck sometimes. You take it out and they have them all rolled up, or it'll just be in a big ball jammed in. And so it's nice when we go out to a pool that we opened, and you can look right on the paperwork that it's, fan folded towards the shallow end, because most of the time the shallow end is where there's the most deck space to unroll the cover. So then, you take the bag out, and if it's rolled towards the house, so then you would take the cover off take the bag off the cover, and then you just need to then realize, okay, so we're going to take it out and situate it so that it rolls away from the house. And then you got to imagine this cover that's, as wide as the pool rolled up. And now one guy grabs one side, one guy grabs the other side, and you can walk that straight out over top of the pool, and it'll just open up and, and cover over top of the swimming pool.
Nice.
Thank you.
What kind of brand are you guys using typically for your solid cover?
So the solid safety cover that we use primarily is made by a company called Garrett Liners, and they make covers, and they do that up here in Pennsylvania. They're in Falsington. They've been in business. Well, we've been in business 62 years, and I think they may be in the same place for 65 years. We've been working with them for a really long time, and they do a really nice job with the cover. So one thing that we haven't talked about cover-wise that I think sometimes gets missed, but I know it's something that I teach the guys. We actually have been doing training the last Tuesdays and Thursdays for the last 2 weeks. But when you're raising the anchors up, so you have these brass anchors that are in the deck. They're 3/4 inch anchors, and they have a 1/4 inch Allen key in the top. So you thread them up, and then you thread them down. Now the whole anchor is only 2.5 inches, maybe 3 inches, top to bottom. But the piece that threads out is only really about an inch. And what I see the guys doing a lot of times, especially if they, some of these guys use a drill and they'll zip these things up. Well, they take them out too far, right? So you have, maybe a 1/2 inch of thread, and then you have a 1/2 inch of the neck of the anchor, and then the top. So I try and make sure you tell the guys, it's like, hey guys, if you see any threads, then you have the anchor raised too tall, right? Because the spring that goes over top of the actual head of the anchor is only, it's probably only 1/8 of an inch. Maybe 3/16 of an inch thick. So you don't need that much exposed. But what happens is when they take the anchors up too far, the tension that's on those anchors. So certainly I've seen the anchor just snap, because now you only have one or two threads in, and you get a snow load or something that really puts tension, or a real heavy rain, and the pump doesn't kick on right away, you'll snap that anchor right in half. So that's something that I think gets missed sometimes as they raise the anchors up a bit too much.
Yeah. Are there any other types of covers besides
So
solid and
yeah,
mesh that
so
are
we talked,
used?
I primarily talked about solid safety covers. There's mesh safety covers. There's a standard mesh, and now they have a commercial mesh cover, which is actually like trampoline material, super strong. We use that on some commercial pools. I actually put that on my own house when I first got mine back in like 2000, and there was a stretch for 3 or 4 years, man. I'd open my pool after Memorial Day. It was a swamp. I would just take a trash pump home and drain it and clean it. It was just easier for me to do that than try and get it clean. They've since come out with what's called a like an upgraded or a super or smart mesh, which is a much denser material, so it doesn't allow as much sunlight to go through. There's a lot of people that are using those up here. But the big misnomer that a lot of the customers have with mesh covers is when it rains or it snows, they have this mesh cover, and they're not accounting for all the water that's being added to the pool, right? So you put a mesh cover on the pool, and between rain and snow, you're filling that pool back up. So this is where it gets a little bit hairy. Everybody, I say everybody does it a little bit differently. There's a lot of companies up here that will close a swimming pool, and they will set up a trash pump if you have a mesh cover, and they'll take the water level down 2 feet. And then they put the mesh cover on, and then they'll let the rain and snow fill the pool back up again over the course of the wintertime. That's one way to do it. That happens all the time here, commercial pools too. But the problem is, you take that water level down 2 feet, you're exposing 18 to 20 inches of plaster. And we know that, plaster as that cementitious surface is supposed to have water in it all the time. And, when you expose that plaster and it dries out, you'll get those check and hazing and, little cracks, and sometimes you'll get a line. So we're a huge proponent of making sure that all the plaster stays covered all the time. So what we'll do in that circumstance with a mesh cover, and there's tons of our customers that have mesh covers, if we've taken them over the account or whatever, we'll take that same automatic cover pump that we would put on the top of the solid cover, and we'll actually just put it on the top step. So the top step usually is an inch, maybe 2 inches below the tile. So it actually sits at just the exact right spot. And you put a hose, connect that hose down, and run it out. And now when the water gets up too high and it's in the tile, that pump will automatically take the water level down and maintain the water at the right spot, which is just below the tile, and just so all the actual plaster's covered. And we do the same thing with a vinyl liner pool. You get a vinyl liner pool that you don't have to worry about tile freezing, but they have a mesh cover, that pool overfills. Now you have the possibility of the water getting up to the coping level, and and actually falling and sneaking back behind the liner. So you still want to be able to maintain the water level underneath of a mesh cover with a vinyl liner too. And the same thing works in reference to putting that on the top step, and and letting that pump over the course of the winter.
Yeah. Very cool.
So, and I think I got off topic, but you were talking about other covers. There are people that will still use what we call a tarp or a water bag cover. A tarp or a water bag cover can just be a piece of black poly plastic. It's we usually put on 6 mil poly covers. I know I still use that at my dad's house. It drives me crazy, but it's an old, it's just a black poly cover. We call it a throwaway or a disposable cover. So it comes usually like 24 by 50, 28 by 50, 32 by 50, and 40 by 50 are the most common sizes. So you figure out which one you need, and that's it. So you take the water level down below the tile, blow out the lines, do everything you normally do, and now you put that poly cover out over the pool. Looks like a big trash bag, and then you've put water bags, which are water bags. It's basically 10 foot long by a foot wide, and it has one or two cells that has a cap on it. So you just fill those cells up with water, and then you put the cap on, and then that works as a weight to keep the cover from blowing away. So the black poly cover is something that we use a lot here. And then they also make what we call water bag covers that have 5, 7, 10, or 15-year warranties, and that would be more like your tarp. That would be something that you see sometimes people maybe cover their trailer with, or much heavier, that you would actually clean in the springtime, fold up and use again for multiple years. Where the black poly cover, what's nice about that is you take that thing off, you fold it up and just put it right in a trash can. And you just get another one for, whatever it is, $75 next year. So those would be the two different kinds.
Yeah.
Two different style covers, I should say.
Yeah, there's lots of different variety. But you
Yep.
the solid would be your preference?
Solid safety cover would definitely be what I prefer for sure.
Right.
Here at Pool Chasers, we're all about sharing information so that you can become even more knowledgeable pool professionals. The folks at Pentair get that. And to show their appreciation, we invite you to enroll in the Pentair Partners Incentive Program. This flexible and simple program rewards you for your loyalty, starting with your very first sale of Pentair equipment or systems. Not only that, but being a partner gives you immediate and exclusive access to programs and training events, all which are developed to help drive even more business to your door. So to start earning rewards, visit pentairpartners.com or click the link in the write-up below.
Cool. Thanks for sharing all that with us. So as far as the equipment goes, pump, filter, things like that, what are some of the best practices when shutting those down and storing them?
Some of the best practices, I guess, one of the things that we do, kind of shared this a bit with you guys back when we were opening the pool. So each piece of equipment that you have on the filter pad, whether it's a pump, whether it's a cleaner pump, filter, heater, chlorinators, they all have drain plugs attached to them somewhere so we can drain the water out. So generally when I close a swimming pool, and what I teach is, if you're ready and, you backwash the filter and get set before you're taking everything apart, what I like to do is I like to take all the plugs out. I take all the plugs out of the heater, all the plugs out of the filter, all the plugs out of the pumps, chlorinators, and I just take all the plugs out and I'll just put them on top of the heater and just let everything naturally drain. And the idea is then I kind of put them in just hand tight and then I'll start blowing everything out. And once we're done blowing all the lines out, then what I do is I start with the heater or whatever's the last piece of equipment. Then I'll start taking those drain plugs off, and then the blower will then start blowing out the heater. Do you understand any residual that's in the heater, any residual that's in the chlorinator, that's in the filter, and then the pump obviously would be last. And then all of those plugs that are now in your hand, we turn the blower off, and we store all those plugs and sometimes like the pressure gauge assembly, and we'll store all those things in the actual pump basket, along with the backwash sight glass. So we'll take all those little pieces, all those little fittings, and we just put them right in the pump basket in front of the pump. So otherwise, when you go to open the pool, you go to start it up, if somebody misplaces that, you're dead because you have, you may not have all those things, those little, particular pieces. The other thing that we do, we talked about blowing out those drain lines, is we'll take the valve handle for the main drain line that we just blew off. We'll take that valve handle off and put that valve handle in the pump basket too. Because when you're closing a pool and you've trapped air between that valve and the bottom drain, customers,
Yeah.
they go over and they're like, oh, why is this one turned why is this one turned differently than those ones? All of a sudden they'll just twist it back. Like, oh, they must have forgotten. They'll turn it and then they've just broken that seal. And then sure enough, all the water will fill back up into that.
Yeah.
So, and that can be a real disaster. Sometimes if the equipment is lower than the level of the water in the pool, then obviously, that will drain down to wherever the level of the water in the pool is where the equipment is. So making sure that gets done. And those are I think the best practices is putting all those things together. And we love to take those valve handles off so that customers aren't, messing with them, over the course of when the pool's closed.
Yeah. What about storing it? You recommend storing it like inside a garage or?
So we don't. As far as the equipment goes, we don't generally take that stuff in. I know there's people with above ground pools. Everything's set up with unions, so sometimes they'll take their pumps in, but the filters will stay out. Generally speaking, on in-ground pools, I would tell you that unless the customer sets something up differently, 95% of the time, maybe a little more than that, all that equipment stays out in the open. What I do at my own house at home is I have a heat pump, and I take a piece of plywood that's just a few inches bigger than the heat pump itself, and I'll just put that piece of plywood on top of the heat pump, hold it down with a couple, like patio block or something. That keeps all the crap from going in the top of the heat pump. They do make covers, like almost like a charcoal grill cover. They do make covers to put over top of the heaters, which are nice. I mean, they sell, they're, relatively expensive, 50, 60, $75, but we don't generally use that because we don't want to make it any nicer for those rodents to live in those heaters over the course of the wintertime. So we want that to be cold and open. So we don't wrap the equipment. I know some guys will take a tarp and cover all the equipment and, put a string around it. That's one practice. I've seen people wrap just the heaters. I have seen some companies that will take the motors off. They'll disconnect the electric and take the motors and store the motors. That's a little bit more old school, but that's generally how that works. Most of the time at this point, most of that equipment stays on site. And we're a big fan of just keeping the grids inside the tank. We think that's the safest spot for them. Some people take the cartridges out or take the grids out. If they're in good shape after we clean them, we put them back together and, clean everything up and put the tank back so everything's ready for the spring. If there's a problem, certainly we'll leave them out and get that addressed. So we also do a lot of, if we go to take those grids out in the DE filter, and I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, but you go to take them out and the grids are actually holding water.
Yeah.
So that's, for us, we see that, those grids, you can't just clean that with a hose. Those need to be acid washed. So we have a system in place where, we'll talk to the homeowner. We'll take those grids back to the store with us. We'll acid wash those grids where we have big 55-gallon trash cans set up, and we'll put them in the tanks, let them soak, overnight, take them off, clean them off, and then put them back together. And then we'll go back and put those grids back in the customer's tank over the course of the wintertime.
How does acid washing help that?
So what ends up happening is, and it can happen for a couple different reasons, whether it's, they don't put enough DE back in or, when they're backwashing, but, whether it's suntan lotion or oils, but it'll actually smother. If you don't have enough DE over top of the grids, then it's going to smother. And then what ends up happening is your DE filter kind of then becomes like a cartridge filter, right? So you just have that cheesecloth material that's covering the grids. That is now your filter media instead of DE, if that makes sense. So, and the pressure just kind of smashes that stuff into the grids. And sometimes you can get it off with a hose, but when they're holding water and the water doesn't want to come out real fast, then chances are they're kind of gummed up and they really need to be drained and cleaned. And I know a lot of people don't. I get this. I keep telling stories of my dad, but I'll go to take my dad's out, and I'm like, "Oh, Dad, these grids." He's like, "Oh, it's been great all summer, buddy. I haven't had to backwash one time." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the DE is only really good for 2 or 3 weeks, Dad." So, but it's that's what he's been doing for 25 years. So there's a big misnomer. When the pressure goes up, you got to backwash. But reality is, you should be backwashing and getting fresh DE because it really only has so long of a life on those grids. But
yeah,
taking them apart, hosing them off real good is something that we do. It's a shame because you do it, and I don't think the customers appreciate doing it well. But when you do it, it is something that's going to make a little bit of a mess. And I do get those phone calls sometimes, like, "Man, the guy's cleaned the filter and there's just DE everywhere." And I'm like, "Well," I said, "I apologize. It's like we don't want it to be everywhere. It is something that's hard to contain if you're squirting the grids, but we try and get the guys to make sure that go to a spot that if you got to carry it 50 feet to an area that they're not going to notice, because you're going to have residual DE on the ground, and make sure you hose off the fence and, make sure you hose things off." But unfortunately, it is something that is messy.
Right.
But it's something that we still think is worthwhile doing.
Speaking of the homeowner, what do you say to them when they try to close the pool themselves?
So I'll tell them I think they're crazy. I do. I don't necessarily. I just think that unless they're so mechanically inclined that they know what they're doing, you make a mistake, you break something underground. I mean, you don't even need to break something underground. You break something above the ground, you don't know. And the problem is with these customers, and it's hard for us to prioritize the customers in the springtime because we close a lot more pools than we open, but we have to prioritize the customers that we close as well. But what happens is they close the pool themselves and they break something. Well, now they can't fix it. And now they're not tied to any company, right? And they're calling around just trying to get this fixed as fast as they can because now the cover's off the pool and their system can't run. So it happens quite frequently. It hasn't happened here for the last year or two as bad because our winters haven't been as cold. But man, when you get some cold winters, we know we're going to open up to some freeze damage, and usually only takes the customer, paying a good bit of money to fix an underground plumbing leak, or having to replace a filter, or a heater because they didn't take the drain plugs out of the heater. It doesn't usually take but one time, and then that won't happen again. But what I try and tell people is, I get it. You're paying to have us close the pool, or paying to have us do that, and it's expensive. But the expense of having us do it, knowing that it's done right, and if something went wrong, we're responsible for that, should give you peace of mind to not try and do that yourself. But I say, hey, you know what? Try opening the pool yourself. If we close it, everything's there. If you don't do something right at the opening, you forget to put a plug here or there, or you're like, you put all the plugs away, and you're like, man, I still got one. I'm like, just flip the switch. You'll find out where that plug goes in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
So if you close the pool yourself, right, and you don't do something right, you flip that switch, there's water squirting out of places it's not supposed to be squirting out of anymore. So, that's when it's a much bigger problem. And I get it. I mean, it could be expensive, but I just think I think people are a little bit, it's just not something that I would do.
Seems
if I
like it'd
were
be
a
a good idea
regular
to
homeowner.
send them like a little quiz, of all the things. And it's like, yeah, I think that's a great idea. If you answer these all right, you're ready to go. And they just, they get done with the quiz, and it's like, yeah, you got all 50 of those questions wrong. I don't think you
right?
should do it.
So we actually have here at Buds, I don't know how many people do this, but we actually have, I bet you we have 10 to maybe 12 blowers that we set up in Tupperware containers, like totes, with hoses. And then we have lids. And people can actually come in and rent the blower. They can rent it for like 4 hours. They'll sign up, and like anything else that you would rent, customers come in, they take the blower, they go home, and they blow it out, which I tell you, at least they're using the right equipment to do that with.
Yeah.
Where I see a lot of people are trying to do it with shop vacs, or, they're trying to use the blower on that, and it's just not strong enough. At least if they're coming in renting a blower, then they're, at least they're going about it somewhat right. So we do that, and we rent them out. We're renting quite a bit.
Do you make them sign a waiver or something that they're taking the risk upon themselves or something?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're helping them close the pool. I mean, we don't have any liability on that. They're coming out and they're renting it. I don't know. I'm sure they're signing that they're taking it. I don't know if there's a waiver that we're making them sign that. I don't think we have any responsibility.
Sure.
I don't know of anything that's ever happened that way. I haven't really thought about that. But, people come in, and again, there's a lot of people that do things themselves here. And Buds has been in the same building for, it's over 60 years now. So you get a lot of people that are comfortable. They come in, they rent their blower, they bring it back in an hour or two, and it costs them maybe, I don't even know what we charge for it anymore, to be honest with you. It might be $40, $25. And, it works for them. And at least they're using the right piece of equipment to do that. And if they're doing that, they should have an idea of what they're doing at this point.
Right. I bet it makes a big difference too if you have a simplistic pool, or a really complicated pool. I mean, if you have a basic pool.
So let's think of that though, right? You break that down. You have somebody that has a 1632 rectangle, or a Grecian, or, just something pretty straightforward with a sand filter. They bought a pretty basic pool. That's going to be somebody that's probably going to work on the pool themselves, where you have somebody that's got a grotto, or they got a raised wall, or, an attached spa. That's somebody's paying 2 or 3 times as much money for the pool. They're not paying. They're not doing that. Right. So that's those people are always pretty much having us close.
Right.
And what are some of the most common mistakes you see when people are closing pools?
So the first thing that comes to mind is, the guys go out to close the pool, and they'll turn the pump off, but they won't take the timer tab off the pump. So we winterize the pool, and then the next day that pump comes back on.
Yikes.
So, and it comes back on the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And that could be doing that for some time until the customer notices that it happened. It happens. We could tell the guys, we have checklists, that the guys have to work through that stuff. But you're having a bad day and you rush a little bit to try and get caught up, and you don't take that timer tab off, or, some customers will put those little timer pins on with pliers. They'll put them on so tight and you can't get it off with your fingers. You're like, all right, I got to get a set of challenge, so, and then on your way over, something else is blowing, you change a valve, and then you go about your thing, and you just forgot to go back and take that pin off. So those are those things. Guys laugh at me because I do things So when I teach stuff, it's like, hey, so you don't want to forget something. If I can't get a timer tab off and I need to go get something, I do the same thing when we're filling the pool. I'll take my keys out. I'll put my keys right on top of the time clock. Or when we're filling a pool, I'll take my keys and I'll put it right on top of the hose bib that I'm turning on. And now when I go to leave, I'm like, oh, that's right, I left the hose on. And my keys are now at the hose bib, which makes me turn the hose bib off. And everybody laughs. And I'm like, but guess what, guys? I'm not leaving until I find my keys. And if my keys are at that hose bib, I'm never going to overfill the pool, right? And the same thing happens. You leave your keys at the timer or something. You're going to figure, oh, that's right. That's where I left them. I always tell the guys to leave the keys so they don't forget stuff.
I tried that once, but I lost my keys. I spent all day looking for my keys. That's how bad my memory is.
Well, the keys got you to that house. So.
The pool's
yeah,
overflowing,
no,
and I was still there looking for my
that
keys.
With keys. I do that when I go to somebody's house. I'll take my jacket off and I'll just put my keys in my jacket pocket, or I bring my book bag in or whatever it is. And I'll just throw my keys on there. And then I know I'm not leaving without it, but I would forget all the time. I forgot like this headset. I left the house this morning. It was literally laying on the bed and I forgot this headset.
You put your keys by it?
So,
You should have put your
go.
keys by it.
Yeah.
I needed to put the headset with my keys and I didn't do that. See that?
Well, that's probably the other thing too, is the autofills. You probably have, just as, taking the pins off the time clock, you want to make sure that you're making sure that
sure.
valve is shut off.
Yeah, that gets a little tricky up here because sometimes those autofills they're not accessible by the pool equipment. Sometimes they go into the house and that's a tricky thing. Do we have a valve to shut them off and then blow it out? And, we can blow it out from, where the connection's made, out to the pool, but then somebody else needs to blow it out. Do you understand, if they got to turn the main off in the house? So, but autofills are they're a little tricky to blow out for sure.
That sounds tough.
Yeah. Any other big mistakes you've seen out there?
Big mistakes?
Or maybe just ones that you see more often?
Yeah. So the anchor thing we talked about, the anchor's being up too high. I will tell you, when you're dealing with water bag covers, I think that the guys overfill the water bags quite a bit too much. They'll just jam the hose in there, walk away, do something else, come back. And the water bags, if they're too full, then they will, if they freeze, anything with ice, it'll expand and can pop those bags. That can create a little bit of a mess.
Is there a thing on there that tells you how much to put in there, or?
No, it's not. It's just something that you just need to fill it up so it's not maxed out.
Okay.
You put the hose in there, it fills up, which is nice, depending on how fast it fills. And then you just want to just take a little bit of water out. Just give that thing. It's just a cheap piece of plastic. You just want to fill it up so that's it's not the way. I will tell you that guys, when they're the poly covers, so, we talked about that 24 by 50 or 28 by 50 poly cover that you put on somebody's pool. So you don't want to use the whole, if the pool's 32 or 34 foot long, you have 16 extra feet of cover, right? But the reality is the water can go down a little bit, right? And you want to have maybe 2 foot past the coping on each side, right? So if it's a 34 foot pool, you want to allow 2 foot on both sides. So now you're going to add 4 feet. So now it's 36. But you also have to allow that the cover goes down into the pool, because the water may be at the bottom of the tile. So that's like another foot. So maybe you need to cut the cover at, 38 feet or, 40 feet. A lot of times what I'll see happen is that the guys will cut the cover too short. They get it too close, because when you have a lot of cover, we want the cover to, we want to fold the excess cover underneath, right? You want it to look neat. It's kind of like when we were in school, we used to wrap our books with brown paper bags, right? You just, you make it nice, you tape it, and everything fits just right. So I think that it looks really nice that when you're putting a cover on, that you fold and tuck underneath, and then you put a water bag on top, and, you kind of make your way around, and the cover looks nice and tight. You do have to leave the space for the water to fill in. But I just find too many times the guys will cut the cover too short, and then they'll just try and make it work, right? And then they have it too tight. Well, the first time you get a big rain and that cover fills up, it's just going to pull down into the pool. So I do see that happens a few times more than I care to think about.
Yeah, that sounds like a real pain if that happens.
Yeah. The other thing that we do that makes me out of my mind is we don't take diving boards off for the winter. So you have a diving board. What we'll do is we'll actually wrap the diving board. So we'll take that same black poly plastic and we'll cut it like 18 inches wide. And then we will take the diving board and then we'll wrap the diving board, kind of gift wrap it. And, you do around the edge where the bolts are, you do around the edge of the diving board, and then usually one strap in the middle. But if you don't wrap the diving board well and you don't do it really tight, the wind will come through there and it'll start ripping that cover up. And then I'm getting a phone call in the wintertime and customers complaining because they got this diving board wrap that's flapping on. And then I'm going out and it's cold and I'm replacing the diving board wrap. And you can rest assured I'm finding out who did or didn't put that wrap on that cover well, because that's not something I want to do in the middle of the wintertime. But
and why do you need to wrap the diving board? What does the weather do to that?
So we wrap it instead of the other practice would be taking it off and bringing it in, just because it's going to sit there for 8 months, and just get dirty and nasty. So, if we put black plastic over it, and wrap it up, it'll stay nice and clean, and we don't have to worry about anything kind of getting in there in the dirt. And it's a white board. Most of the time, it's a white board, and it just finishes nice. It just keeps the finish. One of the things, though, when you have those bases, the Interfab or the SR Smith, or the flight deck bases, you have that white plastic base. You can't put duct tape on the base, because you put duct tape on that 8 months later, the adhesive from the duct tape is not coming off that plastic. So you have to make sure that you wrap the duct tape, around the board and on itself and not on the base. That is something that we'll see happen over time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that.
As a pool pro, you know how much of a headache leaking pools can be for you and your customers. Anderson Manufacturing's goal is to help you turn those leak problems into profits. As the industry leak experts for over 30 years, Anderson is the best source for quality equipment and repair supplies. They also have the educational resources you need to be successful. By using the free materials on leaktools.com or attending hands-on training, you'll be finding leaks in no time. Plus, the people at Anderson are always available to offer helpful advice, whether that's talking you through a tough job or making equipment decisions. If leak detection sounds like the right opportunity for you, give Anderson a call at 1-800-348-1316 to get started with a custom equipment package, or browse their complete line of leak detection and repair solutions at leaktools.com. If you choose to have someone else do your leak work, make sure that they're using Anderson equipment to get the job done right. As a special thank you to our listeners, they'll be adding a free set of LeakMaster products to your next order when you enter the code POOLCHASERS during checkout. Also, if you have not heard episode 87 yet, we suggest you go listen to it, as we interviewed Lance and Brad of Anderson Manufacturing to discuss all things leak detection. So to find out more, click the link below.
Let's get into kind of the scheduling part of it. How do you typically prioritize your closings and organize the schedule?
Everything that I do scheduling-wise, I try and do and schedule geographically. When I say that, if we're going to close X amount of pools a day, whatever that looks like, then I have so many crews, and, the guys will, whether they close 5, 6, or 7 really depends on, how close the pools are together. And also, the level of difficulty of the pool itself. So if I have newer guys in a truck, I'm not sending them out to the pools with the grottos and the attached spas. They're maybe getting the more standard 1632 rectangles. They're kind of getting their feet wet on the the easier or simpler pools. But generally speaking, for me, I'm always working geographically. So I always want to know where the pools are, and I set up guys' routes so that they leave, they kind of do a circuitous route, and then they come back, towards the shop. So where they may drive an hour away, do 5 openings or 5 closings, and then they're driving an hour back. So we try and really set things up geographically, and the ladies here are really they do a nice job of navigating through that and steering customers to, hey, what week would you like? And then, how would you like to do Tuesday that week? And some customers are like, no, I need Wednesday. And that makes it tough because they're off on Wednesdays. And, you always have those exceptions. You always want to work through that. But we really try and schedule and really try to, make that work geographically. Obviously, we're not making any money when the guys are in the truck. We're making money when they're in the backyard. So
Yeah,
that's always something that I'm always trying to work towards.
absolutely. And are you prioritizing your clients you take care of during the spring and summer first?
So we do. We call them VIPs,
Mm-hmm.
and So a VIP is somebody whose pool that we built. And then if we open and close their pool, then we'll extend an underground plumbing warranty to them. So we're the ones opening, we're the one closing. So if they don't have any issues, that'll be something that we know we're opening and closing, they won't have any troubles. And obviously we want to take care of the customers who obviously bought their pool from us and are having us service their pool. We will call all those customers. Now, whether they answer and set a time or not, that's up to them. But we do call them all and say, hey, listen, you closed the pool October 15th last year. You want to set up for, the same time frame this year. And we try and get them set up. We really try and do that starting in July before people are starting to think about closing their pool. As soon as the opening season winds down and everybody's open, we're getting right in and calling those people and trying to get them set up, because inevitably you got a VIP that's calling us September 15th and they want to close the pool the next week. And we've been booked for the third week of September for 2 months.
Right.
And you just have to work that out. We also will only close VIPs on Saturday. So some customers want to be home. That's another reason for them to be a VIP. And we will give them a Saturday date. So Saturday is a mishmash for us. Saturday, we're going all over. Because you just can't. Customer wants a Saturday, we kind of have to give that to them. But I also don't schedule full days on Saturdays. The guys are generally closing 6 pools a day during the week. Then maybe they're getting 3 or 4 pools on a Saturday. Try and get everybody done by 2 or 3 o'clock. It's bad enough they're working 6 days, but knowing you're getting done at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock just gives you that extra little oomph in their step to make it through that day, as opposed to coming in during the week knowing you may work till 6, 7, or 8 o'clock if you have a bad day.
Right. Yeah, that's a good practice. Definitely want to take care of those VIPs, so that's cool you offer the Saturday for them.
Yeah, it's great because we know what we're walking into in that backyard. We know it's a solid safety cover. We know it's this pump, this filter, and we're prepared. We know if they're missing a plug. We open the pool, so we know that we put the bag. We usually take we take the winterizing plugs when we open them. So those black rubber plugs, we take them out. We'll put them in a Ziploc bag, and the guys will say, hey, put the plugs on the shelf in the shed, or put the plugs in the bag with the cover, wherever that looks like. And sometimes we want to know that because you get in some of these people's sheds and you're like, oh my. And at that point, you want to try and keep the stuff together. That's something that we do. We try to keep everything together to make it easier. And it's just nice knowing what you're walking into.
Yeah, for sure. That's good practice. Is there anything that you recommend doing over the winter months as far as like maintaining the pool or keeping it clean, or the covers?
So the covers, certainly. So I get the question all the time, you get a snow load or something, you get a snow load on the cover and there's like, oh yeah, I got to push the snow off the cover. I'm like, I don't. That's not something that we ever do. I never talk to the customers and try and have them take snow off the cover. But certainly we want them to take the water off the cover, because when the water's laying on the cover, if there's something wrong with the pump, like people that have water bag covers, that is a little pool that's collecting water, where the trampoline style, it collects to one spot and it pumps off automatically. But when you have a water bag cover, we want the people to try and keep that dry, because then there's a better chance when the leaves fall, the leaves will blow off the cover. But when it's got an inch or two of water in it, the leaves fall, and then that's it. They're there and they're nasty. So we do try and have the customers, take a leaf rake or whatever and scoop all those leaves off the cover. And if they don't, then it makes for a real mess. When we open the pool in the spring, we will charge the people to, kind of clean and, take those leaves off before we can take the cover off, because we don't want to take a chance of trying to drag those wet leaves. And all of a sudden, before you know it, if you don't have them all, then they just dump right into the pool. And that's a real train wreck. We do try to tell the customers to scoop leaves and try and keep the pool clean, the cover clean that way. And we also tell them to make sure, like, I think it's a good practice. Water bags, those 10-foot double water bags are $7 or $8. And I just think that I always want the guys to say, hey, listen, it's not the worst thing in the world for you to have an extra bag or two. So when one breaks, then the customer has one, they can just drag it to, one of the bags that's broken instead of having to go back. Yeah. So I always think it's a good idea to have the customers check their bags. So when we're done, if they have water bags, say, hey, listen, make sure you check the cover this weekend and make sure, because when you're filling the water bags, if there's a small leak or a small pinhole, You don't realize it. The bag fills up, you put the cap on, you put it in place. There's water all over the deck, right? Because you're dragging that hose around. So you don't necessarily see that the water bag's leaking. But I think it's real important for the customers to just say, hey, listen, we need more bags. And whether we stop out the next time we're in the area or whether they come get them themselves, we definitely want the customer to check on their water bags and also check, and try and remove the leaves and debris from the pool.
Are there any indicators that something's wrong with anything, or is that pretty much when you open it, you'll find the problems?
Yeah. So obviously, what happens is if they're not checking their water bags, the cover may dump in the pool. That's something that, the guys didn't put the cover on right. I'm like, well, we go out here, there's 3 broken bags. I'm like, well, yeah, the bags failed. So, we'll pull it back out and put new bags up. And then, but yeah, for the most part, it's not something, once I would tell you most of the time when we're done closing a pool, we shouldn't be in that backyard again until the actual springtime.
Gotcha.
And after you're closing pools, what's your team doing after that, like for the winter?
So we'll close pools pretty much up until our main closing season is from Labor Day, I would say, through Halloween, right? Usually by Halloween, I would say that 80% of the pools that we're going to close are closed. And then after that, so the guys here, we're seasonal. So the guys will work until there's no more work, and then they'll go on unemployment for a couple months and then come back to work, whether it's March 1st, March 15th, whatever. We have some guys that will stay, longer. I have guys that'll work till November 1st, November 15th. They'll work till Thanksgiving. I have some guys that'll work till mid-December and some guys that'll work till Christmas. Of course, we have a couple guys that stay year round. We just have different periods of time that guys are, used to working till. And a lot of that has to do with their skill sets. The newer guys they're valuable. I'm not going to necessarily keep a newer guy because as you get later and later in the year, you're getting into a lot of those bigger and bigger pools that, they don't just have a swimming pool. That's their whole backyard. So they don't want to put a cover on and make their backyard ugly. Keep those pools open for the waterfalls and everything else.
Yeah.
So the newer guys, they're not going to, they'll be some of the first guys that get laid off. It's the same thing in the springtime. So guys will start coming back February 15th, March 1st, March 15th. And usually by April 1st, you're pretty much mostly all systems are go at that point.
Nice. And do you have any resources or books that you recommend for pool closings or websites, anything at all?
Nothing really off the top of my head that I can think of. I mean, we've done lots of classes. I've taught lots of closing classes for NESPA up here in the Northeast. So if you're looking to get guys comfortable with closings, we just did one last Tuesday for the Penn Jersey chapter of NESPA. We had 25 guys in the customer's backyard, and it was a probably 5 or 6 hour class, and learned how to take your new guys. I mean, some companies do it different ways. We actually do it here. I have the guys, the newer guys, we've been closing pools here in our pool yard for I think 3 or 4 times now, where the guys they'll spend the first half of their day in the pool yard closing pools. We love getting the new guys wet with the plugs. But, we'll have the guys reaching down, putting covers on and off and doing that. And then they'll go out, do their routes in the afternoon, try and spread that work around.
So if somebody in another state even wanted to reach out to you and maybe learn more about it, could they do that? Or maybe they could tag along, or, because I know, we would pay if we were new to do that.
I love talking about pools. So as you guys can tell, I could just keep going. But I would say that, certainly they can call me. We can field those calls at NESPA too. There's everybody would be willing to help. But certainly if you're getting involved, you definitely would want to know how to do it. And there's some classes that are smaller, some classes that are, longer and go into more detail, but it's definitely definitely worth taking a class on.
Right. And I think the best training is to do it in person. So, if
agree.
that's, something you can do, I would definitely look into it.
Mm-hmm.
And
for sure.
And where can people reach out to you, minus maybe the phone number right now?
Yeah. So other than that, whether it's a phone number or you can get me my email, anyway, you can reach me. It's chazb@budspools.com, or my cell phone number. You can call me here at the office. I'm primarily in the office most days right now. I may be out on an estimate, but you can certainly leave a message and I'll I'd be happy to call you back.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chaz. We really appreciate you taking the time to discuss closing pools on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me again, guys. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Hey, Pool Chasers. Thanks for checking out this episode. Did you know that each episode has its own page on our website? This is where you can find more information about the guest and episode topic, as well as all the resources that we discuss throughout the show. To get to the webpage, click the link below. Also below, you will find links to the sponsors of the show, as well as links to follow us on our social media channels. On our channels, you will find some of our favorite clips and bonus material. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Our tag is Pool Chasers. We also have a Facebook group for the Pool Chasers community. Here you will find like-minded professionals all looking to make each other better. One last thing. If the episode has brought you value, please check out our Patreon page to support us. And if you could please rate and review the podcast, we would love to hear what your favorite topics are. Thank you for your time and your ear.
See you out there, Pool Chasers.